There was once a special train, rented and leased for wedding venues and special ceremonies. However, when a rich couple and their families boarded the train for a wedding celebration, the after-party was interrupted by 1,000 bullets flaring. No one survived. But what was it? A cold-blooded murder? Or a robbery gone horribly wrong? No one ever knows till this day. Finished, Henry. The other engines around the shed were not exactly amused nor scared. Henry, I think you've been watching too many Bond movies. Gordon chuckles. This reeks of a corporate espionage plot. The others guffaw at Gordon's comment. Like some dastardly mustache-twirling villain is accomplishing this while petting his evil-looking cat, James chuckles. I've been on this island for well over 60 years and I've never heard of this, Edward chimes. I said it was based on a true story, Henry explains. Yeah, you did say it was based on a true story, Thomas comments, but how true is it? It could be true, Percy squeaks. Or merely a work of fiction, Percy, Toby says. Gordon then thought for a moment. Well, it's partially true. There was a train that hosted venues and events like that back in the day. I forgot what it was named, though. Crimson something, Gordon thinks out loud. Can't remember that much. Curiosity beckons me, Thomas says, smiling and rolling his eyes around excitedly. Mine too, Percy says. It's something we never heard of before. Well, I'm just as curious as the rest of you, chortles Henry. Perhaps someone knows the name of the train. Maybe ask the station master tomorrow, Gordon? I think I will, the big blue engine says, before he and the rest of the crew drift off to sleep. Early next morning, Gordon was indeed talking to the station master while he waited for his passengers to board. The Crimson Chariot! My goodness, I haven't heard someone mention that train in years. Well before my time, the station master exclaims. All special deep red colored coaches. Too bad its service was discontinued. Gordon frowns. Why was it discontinued exactly? Oh, I was just a boy when it did. I don't remember much other than an accident of sorts. Well, who might know, Gordon asks. Old Bailey, the fogman, might know. From word of mouth, he discovered the accident scene. Gordon could only pass the information to his friends. Only Thomas knew Old Bailey, now retired, boarded his local branch train from Ellsridge. I will mention it to him this afternoon, Thomas replies. Thomas the tank engine was puffing along on his branch line in the afternoon sun. He came to a stop and saw Old Bailey waiting on the bench at Ellsridge. Hello, Old Bailey. How goes? Oh, well enough, Old Bailey says, getting off the bench with a cane, walking towards Thomas. And how are you, little blue one? Oh, fine, sir, Thomas replies. I was just wondering. Henry told us a scary story last night about a special train that used to be leased by wealthy folks of back then, and ultimately why its service was discontinued. Some kind of bad accident. Do you remember it at all? It was called Crimson something. Old Bailey looked at Thomas like he'd just unlocked something very traumatic from his past. The Crimson Chariot. But that's only what the papers called it after the accident. Yes, I remember very well. Old Bailey frowned, and I'm using the word accident loosely. Thomas stared in confusion at the old fogman. Was it not an accident? Thomas squeaks. Far from it, Old Bailey continues, thinking back. On a foggy night, I was putting detonators along the rails as fog hovered over the tracks. I was stationed in a small shack where I held all of my tools and equipment for my job. I was given a schedule for the trains that would be passing through. The usual stuff. Some goods trains, a few late-night passenger trains, and of course, the aforementioned Crimson Chariot. The train actually had no designated name, but it was a lease train. It was usually pulled by an engine called Bracken, long before you showed up, Thomas. The press designated the name Crimson Chariot, but that was long after the so-called accident happened. Bracken, the engine in question, wasn't from around here. He was from the mainland. He wasn't arrogant or anything, but just a cheerful, charming chap who enjoyed pulling the lease train. He was a large LMS Royal Scott-class locomotive. He was supposed to come through my area pulling the train, which held a private business party. However, he was supposed to slow down upon reaching my area. Slow down to a speed of 50 miles an hour. However, he didn't slow down. The signal dropped red as he came around the bend. He rushed through the red signal at top speed, derailing, and the coaches slid down off the tracks into the woods, splintering and shattering. It was brutal. Some passengers were ejected through the windows and mortally wounded. Bodies lay everywhere. I quickly ran towards the wreckage. Bracken was completely mangled, and he was already in his last moments. Some passengers began screaming at the grisly scene, as most passengers were killed instantly by the impact, or from being crushed or cut. I had to phone for help. Before I can run up the line towards the nearest signal box, I was met by a man in a sharp suit who held a revolver to my face as others emerged from the woods and began raiding the brake coach. I was shaken down, but the only object worth any value I had on my person was a silver pocket watch. Whoever this group of bandits were, they were very organized. They didn't dress like typical bandits. They all wore suits. They all wore gloves. And after they had basically raided and robbed both the living and the dead, and what the train itself had to offer, they left. But I'll never forget that man with the gun in front of me. I'll never forget his face, those piercing blue eyes, and his voice when he realized he had to leave quickly. "Guess you'll live to breathe another day, kid." And he disappeared amongst the other thieves. Bracken, the engine, was barely holding on to his life. He wheezed in a wary voice when I reached his cab. "Bailey." I walked around to his smoke box as he lay on his side and wheezed out a name I will never forget. "Hansen. It was Hansen. We were set up." Then Bracken passed. I was finally able to call for help. The name Crimson Chariot came about from the local newspaper when they interviewed the only witness and survivor of the crash, me and the conductor. And it was the name Crimson Chariot came about because of the visceral amount of blood and red splintered wood strewn across the wooded area. It was a very grisly and gruesome sight. The lease train was discontinued not long after that. Bracken was scrapped. The conductor went on to live a long life before dying only last year. The thieves were never caught, but police estimate they made off with about £400,000 worth of cash, jewelry, and other items combined. I was questioned by police, even repeating the name Bracken gave me, Hansen, but I was never contacted again by the investigators, so nothing ever came of it. They basically got away with it. Thomas was speechless. "That's some story, Old Bailey." The signal clears and Thomas had to leave, but before he does, he asked the old fogman, "If this criminal or robber were still alive today, would you be able to recognize him, Old Bailey?" His eyes and his voice I'll never forget. He had such a cold, dark stare that dripped with no remorse, states the old fogman. Thomas puffed away from the station's platform. Deep thoughts about Old Bailey's story lingered, and if he could bring some closure to it. Thomas wanted to bring some closure to it, but he had no idea how.
For true closure to happen, you must wield the power of a prime.